Since the beginning of time, there has been magic in the world. In ages past, when magic, science, and religion were one, people thought the magic of the earth made the sun rise and set, change the seasons, and bring feast or famine. But who were the first magicians? Were they the ancient wise men who practiced secret rituals of healing and purification? These shaman entranced their audiences, weaving stories and performing illusions. Were they the first to realize that spellbinding and deception gave them the secret power to become the masters of mystery? Today's masters of mystery practice their art with a skill that the ancients could hardly imagine. Audiences are still drawn to the light, even though the flickering campfire has been replaced by the glowing neon of cities like Las Vegas. Here, every night, 365 days a year, thousands of people gather to be entertained and astounded. In venues like Caesar's Magical Empire, magic is big business, drawing the best performers in the world to feed the public's insatiable appetite to be spellbound. But what is it about magic that appeals to a modern audience, an audience that is, by nature, more skeptical and well-informed? Don't most people realize when they watch a magician they're being tricked?
Magic's a very peculiar condition, because although you realize that what's going on isn't real, you don't completely suspend your disbelief in the same way. In fact, you kind of demand to have your disbelief suspended for you. You want your disbelief unwillingly suspended. Magic is an imitation, it's a theatrical imitation of human action. But it's a theatrical imitation of impossible human action.
It appeals to, I think, all ages of people, all nationalities, all languages. I think it's probably something that's inside the human mind, maybe built into our DNA. It's just something that appeals to everybody.
Magic teaches you that life is filled with surprise. The hat was empty, and now there's a rabbit inside. Whoa! Magic also tells us that things are not always what they seem to be.
In order to keep the power that a magician holds over his audience, the mysteries behind the magic must remain closely guarded secrets.
The first rule of magic, that magicians, if they're sincere in what they're doing, is never reveal your secret. That's an oath that many of us take very seriously, because that is the way that the ancient mystery traditions have been passed on, through symbols beyond words. The word secret and the word sacred flow from the same source, and that is how the mysteries are passed on.
And because magic is a big business whose top stars can earn millions a year, the need to protect magic's secrets has become even more important. After all, much of the universal appeal of magic springs from the eternal question, how do you do that?
Magicians protect their secrets primarily for artistic reasons. Because one of the beautiful things about seeing a performance of magic is that it leaves you lots of room to think. you see an event, and there's lots to think about, including how could this possibly be done in view of all the rest of my experience. I've never seen somebody really float through the air. Consequently, when I see somebody float through the air on stage and it appears to be happening, there's lots of room for me to think. It's a very intellectually stimulating art form. It's one that you can't watch passively. You can't just sit there and go, oh yeah, she's floating through the air. You just can't. It's in human nature to be skeptical.
It doesn't necessarily take a complex illusion to fool the audience. In the hands of a skilled magician, even a simple trick can be baffling.
This is a favorite trick of mine. A stack of these wooden round checkers, all resting on a center dowel rod. They happen to be right side up, but they possess a capacity, a characteristic called juxtapositional reciprocity, which makes it literally impossible to turn them upside down. Now, I've tried that for years, never succeeded. What I just did, the method I know I was using, is the trick and the props involved. What you experienced as the observer or the spectator, that's the illusion.
The real difference between a trick and an illusion is that a trick sets up an intellectual challenge between the viewer and the magician. If you figure it out, the trick, you've won. If you don't figure out the trick, you're just kind of annoyed and it's just a trick. An illusionist can take the very same trick and kind of diffuse the intellectual challenge by wrapping it in mystery, in a story, in metaphor, in symbolism, in allegory, and create a piece of theater, an enchanting theater, to bring you in.
The importance of theater to magic is well understood in the East. The keen skills and poetic beauty of Chinese and Japanese magic have long fascinated magicians in the West, but not much is really known about ancient Asian magic. Beautiful illustrations show seemingly impossible tricks, such as exhaling bees and turning men into frogs. These illusions, if they ever existed, seem to be lost forever. Early travelers offered colorful accounts of Asian conjurers and may have brought back some of their secrets. The linking rings are thought to be Chinese in origin, but their roots are shrouded in obscurity.
Playing risky, feeling frisky. There's no turning back. You're caught in the act.
The earliest confirmed account of a magic performance can be found in ancient Egypt. The Westcar Papyrus, discovered in 1823, tells of a local magician who was summoned to perform before the pharaoh.
The earliest illusion of which we have any record takes us back to the time when King Cheops was building the Great Pyramid at Giza, approximately 2600 BC.
The conjurer, named Dedi, performed a fascinating illusion. He apparently cut off the head of a goose. The decapitated animal then walked around the room until its head was miraculously restored. The ancient papyrus goes on to describe how Dedi also decapitated and restored a pelican, and then an ox. The magician did, however, refuse the pharaoh's suggestion that he behead one of the royal prisoners. Nearly 5,000 years later, we can only guess about the magical secrets Dedi used. Did he have knowledge of animal hypnotism? Did he use basic sleight of hand? How did Dedi fool the superstitious audience into thinking they had witnessed actual decapitations? Most people at the time believed in natural magic. They believed that rivers, stones, and animals all possessed spirits. Some good, some evil.
It is quite clear that the primitive peoples, in witnessing an illusion or a trick, would believe that this was produced by spirit aid. and would doubtless have a great sense of awe.
Magicians have always used ignorance and superstition to confuse their audiences.
Magic was used in the ancient Greek mystery traditions, in temples. There's books with illustrations of pneumatics and hydraulics. For example, the doors of the temple, when the high priest would open them, bellows would press into the floor and fire would appear on the altar, make the fire jets flare up, creating a Wizard of Oz-like effect.
The earliest trick of which we have a record, as opposed to an illusion, is the cups and balls. This, we know, is one of the oldest tricks ever performed, in which balls appear and disappear in the most bewildering fashion beneath inverted cups.
Accounts of the cups and balls routine date back to the 1st century AD, but it's in the Middle Ages that the trick really became popular. In that time, magicians were more commonly known as jugglers. These traveling performers could be found working alongside minstrels, troubadours, and acrobats. Jugglers would show up on a village green and begin delighting the audience with displays of simple sleight of hand.
From my experience, I feel the plot of the Cups and Balls is a game of hide-and-go-seek. There's an object of desire, and you're trying to find it. And there's surprises along the way.
Performers would amaze the audience with a repertoire consisting of 20 or 30 impressive sleight-of-hand tricks.
The Cups and Balls is so simple that it's terribly complex. The Cups and Balls, in its way, is an abstract piece of magic.
The disappearance of the balls, coupled with the magician's bewilderment as they reappear somewhere else, defies explanation.
The magician pretends that it's a big deal that the 3 balls are assembling under the cups, but the audience is likely to applaud in a half-hearted manner. The whole function of that is to accustom the audience to the size, the little size of these balls. And under cover of all of these little tricks, the magician secretly sneaks huge balls underneath the cups, and suddenly raises the cups, and there are the huge balls, and now the audience realizes what the plot was really about.
1, 2, 3. The first cup, it's empty.
In ancient Egypt, street magicians shouted the phrase "gully gully" to drum up an audience. In the Middle East today, the words have become synonymous with the trick.
Now chicken, lie 1 egg, and you need the cup.
Though the balls are often replaced with less manageable objects.
Chicken and steak. No, allez là, il y a un gros petit poussin là, un autre pollo aquí, chicken over qui, and now they have 3 more chicken, noch 3 kleine Küken, ich habe eine Küken hier, noch ein Küken da, and another Küken here. It's going to be 5 kleine Küken. That is a swatch. Now, it's going to be 6 chickens altogether, and another one over here. Elle va se rester petit poussin sur la table. Il y a encore un ici. Now I have 2 here, 2 there, 2 here, 1 here, 7 chickens altogether.
Now, when it comes to the cups and the balls, do magicians really think that the average non-magician believes that these balls just appeared magically under these cups? I don't think so. I think most people believe that the magician somehow cleverly got them there when I wasn't looking.
Okay, let's do some real magic. Hit it. We're happy now. Like Ali Bongos from hell.
Magicians Penn and Teller have often been criticized by the magic establishment for their irreverent attitude and their so-called exposures of magical secrets.
If they start clog dancing, I'm leaving.
But it was their fondness for the cups and balls tradition that led to the creation of a modern alternative to the classic routine.
The Cups and Balls.
I've been fascinated by the Cups and Balls for a long time. I find that if I practice it late at night, I will stay up all night doing it. It's an insidious, dangerous kind of thing. It sets some sort of, synapses in operation that shouldn't be in operation. But I found myself sitting at diners, and at diners, I'll grab a coffee cup and I'll grab a paper napkin and I'll do really silly things. Now, let me show you my idea of a really silly thing. A really silly thing is to take the ball and put it underneath the cup. Now, that doesn't seem like much of a trick, does it? But let me show you how that trick was done. I took the ball and pretended to put it in my hand. Now, it's not really in my hand, it's really hidden in this hand. And now this non-existent ball, I then pretend to place underneath the cup, but in fact, I'm secretly sneaking the other ball under the cup at the same time. So I would sit at diners doing utterly pointless magic. Here we are, I am now simulating commonplace reality by pretending to put a ball under a cup. This could be simulated by really just putting the ball under the cup. That's how crazy I am when it gets to the cups and balls.
We're going to break 4 basic rules of magic. Now, the first rule is you never do the same trick twice. We're going to do the same trick twice. Second rule of magic is you never tip the gaff to the lay public. That means you never tell people how a trick is being done. I'm going to tell you exactly how this trick is being done.
Magicians are sometimes the easiest people in the world to fool. So when magicians heard that magicians were supposed to be really upset about our cups and balls presentation, the magicians got outraged, started writing terrible articles about us in magic magazines. Like anybody cares, 4 people read magic magazines. And it was absolutely wonderful because suddenly we had a tempest in a top hat.
The third rule of magic is you never let the audience see your secret preparation. This has got to be done backstage, out of sight, so the audience does not know what is hidden in which pocket. And the fourth rule of magic is something even Paul Daniels would agree with me on. No one in the world would argue with this. You never, ever do the cups and balls with clear plastic cups.
Now, you ask any of our audiences right after we've done this, how did they do that? They'll say, we don't have a clue. It was all too fast. Precisely.
So here's our version of the cups and balls. Take the first ball, put it in the hand of the first cup. And the second ball, simultaneously secrete it beneath the cup, put it in our hand and show it. Take the third and final ball, put it in your hand and show it in the cup, and place it in the cup at the same time so you secrete and reveal it. Now all step the second half, 3 cups, all loaded, 3 balls on top. Center ball, please, center cup. These are the side balls you put away anymore. We have 3 in the center cup. These 3 balls that come over here, and this is not juggling. This is called misdirection. For looking over here, Teller takes the final ball under. There's 1 more on either side. And of course, Mr. Barney Lime for our finish. That's the cups and balls.
This is my invention. The silverware instrument.
Well, now comes the teach a trick portion of the show, folks. This is where I teach you all how to perform a magic trick. I'll demonstrate the trick so you can see what it looks like, then I'll show you how it's done so you can amaze your friends. It's a simple trick with a purple handkerchief, a little squeeze. It changes into an egg. The handkerchief jumps into the pocket. That's the trick.
Secrecy is essential to magic as a hobby or a profession because, by definition, deception, whether for good or evil purposes, assumes and requires that something is being concealed or kept secret from the objects of the deception.
That's the trick. Now I know you're thinking, okay, sure, he can do the trick. He does this for a living. I'll never be able to do it. It's really easy. Once you know the secret to the trick is right there. You use 2 handkerchiefs. Make sure they're the same color. You also need what we in magic call a magician's egg. Now, a magician's egg is not an egg that is laid by a magician. It's a wooden egg laid by a decoy. It's hollowed out. There's a little hole in the side. That's all you need to do the trick. 2 handkerchiefs and the wooden egg. Now, before you perform the trick, you have to do what we in magic call your presets. This is what you do before you come out on stage. One of the handkerchiefs goes into your pocket. The wooden egg goes into your pocket.
We get paranoid when we want to preserve something that we think is in danger of being taken away from us. In modern magic, for much of the 20th century, the focus was really almost exclusively on technique.
As you're chatting with the people in the audience, the right hand slips into the pocket, takes out the wooden egg. The audience will never notice this because they're not watching you. They're watching the people you're talking to. In magic, this is called misdirection. Bring the egg out clipped. between the two middle fingers and the palm of the right hand. Hold your hand in a natural position. In magic, this is called palming. As a young boy, I used to practice this in Walmart. Now you're ready to start the trick as far as the audience is concerned. Slowly poke the handkerchief into the egg. In magic, this is called poking the handkerchief into the egg.
When magic is reduced to technique, then secrecy is pretty important. But when magic is about the frame around the trick, then secrecy is not as crucially important.
If someone on the side should notice the hole, whatever you do not panic, stay calm, do what I do. Remove the hole from the egg. Then pretend to crack the egg into a glass. That way you don't end up with egg on your face.
To some degree, secrecy has always been a part of magic. But in some periods, it was also a liability. By the late Middle Ages, magicians in Europe began to face strong opposition from the church. At that time, belief in witchcraft and the supernatural was pretty universal. In a deeply superstitious age, any miracle not sanctioned by the church was considered black magic, and therefore suspect. Many magicians were threatened with execution if they did not reveal the secrets of their tricks. Sharing tricks with the clergy undoubtedly saved many magicians from being burned as witches. The years of the Inquisition by the Catholic Church imposed great difficulties on conjurers. All it took was just one person to point the finger of accusation to endanger a conjurer by accusing him of being in league with the devil. Despite persecution, magic was still a popular, though risky, profession. Eventually, some magicians began to enjoy the wary patronage of wealthy landowners and the aristocracy. But this time, the roaming magician had a limited repertoire of tricks to perform. Playing cards weren't yet freely available, and large illusions that relied on props were too expensive. So, magicians relied largely on sleight of hand and storytelling, feats of natural magic. Tricks involving animals and birds were popular. Secret methods of training and mesmerizing birds into performing impossible feats have been known to magicians since ancient times. For almost 300 years, the tide of religious persecution ebbed and flowed over the magical arts. During the reign of Henry VIII of England, the penalty for sorcery was death. By the late 16th century, the persecution of witches had become a bloodbath. It was this frenzy that led to the publication of the very first magic book in the English language. It was an attempt by its author, Reginald Scott, to save the lives of magicians. The Discovery of Witchcraft, published in 1584, sought to separate the real skills of the magician from the diabolical powers of witches. Of course, to do this, Scott had to reveal the secrets to the public. This remarkable book of magical revelations contains illustrations of magical props, such as these trick knives.
Scott used magic tricks in order to prove that these apparent miracles were brought about purely by natural means and not by being in league with the devil, believing that this would be a very telling argument against witchcraft. And so a whole section of that book is devoted to a description of conjuring tricks, some of them still being performed to this day.
simple explanations of powerful illusions were revealed for the first time, and Scott's crusading work saved many magicians from being burned at the stake. Magicians have long depended on their physical dexterity and sleight of hand skills to perform magic tricks. A talented magician can prove the saying, "The hand is quicker than the eye."
I would define sleight of hand as the creation of magical effects through purely dexterous or manual means. It's a little easier to demonstrate sleight of hand than it is to define it. I could demonstrate it with this Queen of Diamonds. Watch it closely. This is the world's fastest card trick. That's sleight of hand.
Armed with sleight of hand skills, a magician can turn the simplest of props, like 2 rubber bands, into the most fascinating of magical tricks. A trick that can stand up to the closest scrutiny of even the most observant and skeptical audiences.
That's behind. That is in front. Is that correct?
That's correct.
No gaps, right? You can see that. There's no way can it come through there, David, right?
What? Jeez!
Can it come through the middle?
No.
It can't do that, can it?
Wow.
Sleight of hand is the kind of magic performance that depends less on special props and special mechanics and more on the acting and the physical skill of the performer. It's often considered the sort of the rock bottom test. What could you do if somebody put you naked on a beach? Could you do a magic trick for them? And in fact, there are magic tricks that you can do naked on the beach, and I've done them naked and on the beach.
To understand the complexity of Teller's life, you need to know the 7 basic principles of magic. 1, palm. To hide an object in an apparently empty hand. 2, ditch. To secretly dispose of an unneeded object. 3, steal. The opposite of ditch. To secretly obtain a needed object. 4, load. To secretly move the needed object to where it's needed. 5, simulation. To give the impression that something that hasn't happened has. 6, misdirection. To lead attention away from the secret move. And 7, switch. To secretly exchange one object for another.
I remember when I was a kid with palming. Palming means hiding something in your hand so that no one can see it, but so that your hand is still held in a very natural position. I would walk around all day long with something just palmed in my hand, and it was just sitting there very calmly in my hand. But I would do things like I would drink glasses of water. I'd walk through the kitchen and I'd say, "Hi, Mom," carefully not exposing the palm.
Looks simple, doesn't it?
To become a perfect sleight of hand artist is possible. You can get close, and it takes years. My favorite sleight of hand artist of all time was Cardini. He invented a lot of the techniques that magicians use today, but it wasn't just that. It was the context. He had a character and he had a plot. He was a tipsy gentleman, English gentleman coming home from a society affair, and the cards that would appear in his fingers appeared by themselves. He wasn't controlling them. And then another one would appear and he would get more confused and throw it away, and it was as if he was hallucinating the whole performance, and that the magic was happening around him. And that's a story of our lives. Magic is happening around us all the time. And he was the essence of a man in a magical world.
Welsh magician named Richard Valentine Pitchford, performing as Cardini, elevated card magic to an art form. His dexterity was so great he could even manipulate cards while wearing gloves. Most performers today who include card magic in their act owe a debt to Cardini. The manipulations and palming techniques that he invented are the basis of many modern routines. Cardini was a true master of all kinds of sleight of hand. Few modern performers can match his skill with a billiard ball.
Magicians really do incredibly irrational and bizarre things all the time. Someone from another planet who'd never seen a magic show would wonder if these people were psychotic, the irrational things they do. To turn those demonstrations into an entertaining presentation, storytelling is the key that ties it together.
Yellow cotton thread, a single length which will represent the entire universe. In the stories of India, it is the god Brahma who creates the universe and all that there is. Brahma then retires, and the god Vishnu takes over, and Vishnu sustains and preserves the universe in every moment of its existence. And then, at the end of time, the god Shiva appears and dances the Tandava dance, a weird and terrible dance of fire, in which the entire material universe is destroyed in blinding light, brighter than 10,000 suns. And the universe is no more. There is only silence, vast, cosmic sleep. And out of this cosmic sleep, Brahma wakens himself again. He looks about and seeing nothing, he decides to create the universe again. And creating it, he retires, pleased with his eternal play.
Armed with dexterity, skill, and the spellbinding talent of storytelling, it's no wonder magicians have sometimes been accused of using magic for nefarious purposes.
There have always been con men in magic. If you look at the great classic painting by Hieronymus Bosch of The Conjurer, you'll see a magician entertaining with the cups and balls, but that's only half the scenario. On the other side of the painting, the real illusion is happening. The cut purse, the pickpocket is making the swindle. So here in medieval times, you see the relationship between the magician and the dark side of the magician, the shadow of the magician. When we move to present day, every day we read in the newspapers about swindlers and silver-tongued con artists and shape-shifting cheats getting caught. But there are those magicians that are really invisible that never get caught.
Technically speaking, Martin Nash is neither a magician nor a con man. But performing as the charming cheat, he uses his agility and skill to manipulate cards and the audience.
How you do? I'd like to welcome to the show, and it's cheating time. Now, there's one question I do get asked. People say, is this an honest deck of cards? Is it marked? Is it gimmicked? Or is it tricked up? I'll be honest with you, and this is the only time I will be doing the entire performance. I buy my cards in a drugstore, so as you'll see, the cards are honest. It's only the hands that cheat.
The ability to produce any card at will is only a small part of Martin's repertoire. It's taken him more than 30 years to achieve an expertise for manipulating cards virtually by feel alone. It's a skill he's willing to share.
I am going to show you how to do this, but please don't use it, because if you do, as I say, I would feel very bad. In order that you can see everything, I'm going to do it with all of the cards face up. So the ace of spades is on top of the deck. Now, if you want to keep the ace for yourself, all you do is just take the second card. I mean, it's just that simple. You see, just reach and take a card. Now, if you want, you just speed it up and it'll look a heck of a lot better. One thing that's always fascinated me is the simple fact that you practice in my particular field. And I guess in my life I've spent over, maybe 3,000 hours practicing to do a second deal. And when you stop and think of it, it's a little bit ridiculous because you're practicing so that nobody can see it.
Even using slow motion replay, it's impossible to see how he manages to deal the second card from underneath the ace.
Not too long ago, I was in a game, and there's one type of person I really don't like. They get very, very suspicious. And he took the 4 aces, and he placed them into 4 different parts of the deck. Now, of course, I was watching very carefully so as I would know where the cards are, the 4 aces. I did happen to notice that there was exactly 6 cards above the first ace. 3, 6. I also happened to notice there was 8 between the next, 7 between the next, and 6 between the next. So because I already know where those aces are, I can be able to deal them to myself. But then he took it one step further. He pushed the cards in flush, and then he cut the deck. Now, to make it even more difficult for me, he took the deck, and in his hands, like this, he gave it the deck a shuffle. Now, of course, I have absolutely no idea as to where those aces are. 3 fellas came over. And they said, do you mind if we join the game? We said no. So that meant that we had 8 people in the game. But at that point, I happened to notice that one of them had a great deal of money. And who would have the money, sir? It's an 8-handed game. Number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Who? 4. Number 4. You must be a card player. That's one of the most difficult hands to set up. As I say, I had no idea where anything was, so I was just dealing the cards, so I'm just going to be playing by luck. Well, he happened to get a king, so I'm just playing by luck because, well, I would like to match him the spade to the spade. Now, the odds of getting a pair on the first, well, he did happen to get a pair, but that's just pure blind luck, and so I would have to reach over and get the ace of hearts for myself. Now, 3 of a kind, of course, is a very good hand, so, you know, well, I didn't expect him, but he did, which means I had to follow with the ace of diamonds. And 4 of a kind was practically, well, it wasn't impossible for me to get it also. So for those of you who may be interested, there's a little game at my house this evening. I accept both Visa and MasterCard, so just give me a call. Thank you. When you're sitting down at the table and you're entertaining people doing quote-unquote card tricks, then you'll be using entirely different moves than you would if you were sitting at the table playing for big money. And the one thing about the card cheat, if he makes a mistake, he gets beat up. The magician, he gets laughed at. There's a big difference.
Now watch it really carefully, okay?
If you ever see a 3-card Monte worker on the street, no matter how skillful you may be as an observer, and even if you're a professional magician, don't play the game. Because it isn't a game. They can change the rules on you at any moment.
Never bet with strangers because you're going to lose it. Wow. So thank you very much.
And in the unlikely event that somehow or other you should finally be able to get a correct win on something, as you walk away, you'll soon meet some people in an alley.
Throughout history, wherever the public gathered, both con artists and honest magicians were guaranteed a rapt audience. In the 18th century, nothing could rival the crowds and excitement of the annual fair. It was a carnival, a circus sideshow, and a market all rolled into one. Fire eaters and snake handlers vied for attention, while contortionists, midgets, giants, and sword swallowers displayed their skills and natural talents to astounded onlookers. But of all these competing spectacles, the only true star was the magician.
The greatest magician of the early 18th century was a man called Isaac Fawkes. We know very little of his origins. It's suspected that he might have been a Londoner, but he came to great prominence in the early 1720s.
Isaac Fawkes' masterpiece was the egg bag. By sleight of hand alone, he could produce an astonishing succession of eggs and coins from an apparently empty bag. It cost 1 shilling to be entertained by Mr. Fawkes. The first true star of the art, he eventually became the highest paid magician of his day, with a deeply devoted following. When Fawkes died in 1731, newspapers reported he left a fortune of £10,000, worth almost $1 million today, further proof of his popularity. But it would take another 100 years before magicians realized that they could hold an audience for more than a trick or two.
Hi, my name's Anthony Sullivan, and here's another great...
of theater, magicians were quick to enhance their illusions and sleight of hand with stage effects and lighting. A new era had dawned. Magicians had found a new home and a new audience eager to be entertained. They now dressed in formal clothes, just like the theater-going public. Elevated above the juggling and fire eating of the fairgrounds, magicians now held center stage. New illusions and tricks were invented, especially for theaters, and for the first time, magicians found themselves at the top of the marquee. One of the first magicians to establish himself in the theater was the uncanny Scot, John Henry Anderson. Born in 1814, he started his career as the Caledonian Conjurer, later found fame as the Great Wizard of the North.
He certainly made a tremendous impression and arrived in London in 1840 at the New Strand Theatre. There he was advertising his gorgeous silver apparatus, and certainly his stage was eye-filling. He performed most of the standard tricks of the day, Chinese rings, birds being produced from a cauldron, and he was not really an innovative magician. But he was a great showman, and he was also the first of the very great publicists.
The innovation of people in the 19th century, like John Henry Anderson, was to perform in a more natural setting. The stage setting was more like an elegant drawing room, and the magician was performing basically in formal evening attire. It was really the birth of the modern genre of magic.
John Henry Anderson's legacy has lasted more than 150 years. His pioneering style of showmanship paved the way for thousands of performers around the world. The larger-than-life demeanor that began with Anderson created a market for magic that has grown steadily ever since. Audiences demanded bigger and better shows. Magicians were happy to oblige. The late 19th century brought the golden age of stage magic, with magicians playing to packed houses around the world. Some even became household names. The growth of motion pictures in the 30s led to the decline of stage magic. In movies, all manner of wonder is possible. Only the true masters of mystery were still guaranteed to hold an audience spellbound. Today, the demand for magic has returned. The growth of entertainment capitals like Las Vegas, coupled with the mass appeal of television, has created a new generation of stars.
Have a safe journey home.
These masters command great fees and a global following that the magicians of the past would have found difficult to comprehend. But today, magic still satisfies that primeval desire in all of us to be amazed and entertained. The bright neon of Las Vegas has replaced the light of the campfire, and a new generation dares to explore the mysteries of magic.
You like this TLC?
Totally dangerous. Please do not try these at home. For centuries, magic has amazed and horrified audiences with dangerous illusions. Countless lovely assistants have been mutilated, sawn, and beheaded in the name of entertainment, at least by appearance. One of the oldest death-defying tricks is the Indian sword basket. A girl is placed in a flimsy wicker basket. Swords and spears are then thrust through it. Danger, or implied danger, is a powerful attraction for those in search of a vicarious thrill. Magicians always happily give the public what they want, and in the process, they explore the primal fears within all of us.
This is danger that is ultimately safe. I see this, and yet I know deep down everything is really safe. The magician isn't putting the swords through the assistant. He's not really sawing her in half. It looks that way, and there might be stage blood all over the stage. But in magic, things are not always what they seem.
Nothing fills us with the joy of life like the fear of death. It feels good to scream. It makes you feel alive. It makes you feel wonderful. Oh yeah, calm down. It's just a little bit of red paint in a squeeze bulb. It's no big deal. Quiet guy screaming. It's not a great deal.
My partner Penn and I have always admired the honeybee. We think it's a beautiful thing for the same reasons that you find it in classical literature. You know, I think this is one of the eclogues devoted to beekeeping. The bee is a very lovely kind of animal to have on the planet, and we thought that it would be nice to do something with bees. And the only plot that we could think of was we thought that we should parody the way magicians vaunt their power by producing live tigers, by producing 100,000 apparently dangerous animals.
Well, you want wild animals? We got wild animals. Teller, bilda tila, ein, zwei, drei, vier, 6, 7. Okay. So they're not Bengal tigers, but they are alien, six-legged, hairy monsters capable of injecting your flesh with a deadly poison. Yes, they're bees.
Aware that a sting in the eye can cause blindness and that multiple stings can be deadly, Penn Teller took every precaution to make this trick safe.
So we went to an allergist, who incidentally declined to be named in any publicity because he didn't think this was exactly a legitimate thing for an allergist to do. But the allergist tested us for the stings of every kind of stinging insect. Neither of us had a serious allergy to it.
I know what you're thinking. You're saying to yourself, yeah, but Sigmund and Leroy putting those little...
This is a routine that's genuinely dangerous. And meanwhile, of course, Penn and Teller are deftly performing their magic tricks throughout.
Let's do a number equal to every tiger Sigmund and Leroy ever produced. There we go. There's for all the ones they produced other times. And what about all the little bunnies and doves and kittens that they ever pulled out of anywhere? I think we've covered Sigmund
We have to go
Leroy.
step by step with these things. We began by wearing full beekeeper suits, with the hoods, with the full garments, with the thick gloves. And we got in and got used to the idea of the bees being around us, and we noted their behavior. And their behavior was that they never stung unless they were squished.
While we're at it, let's go with Blackstone. You got your Copperfield, you got your Thurston, you got your Kreskin. I know what you're thinking, Kreskin's a mentalist, but I'm sure he pulled a bunny or two in his life. And besides, this bee right here reads minds at least as well as Kreskin. How about all the amateur magicians? Here's the amount of animals produced by all the amateur magicians in North America.
And then we tried it without the beekeeper suits. And then we tried it without the gloves, but we discovered that if we didn't seal around our cuffs, bees would crawl in, and crawling in under the cuff is a dangerous sort of thing because the bee can get trapped, panic, and sting you.
Ouch! Okay, we got South America, we got, ooh, there's Antarctica. Every animal produced in Antarctica is stinging me, right next to Greenland. And we also got Europe and Africa covered here. Don't say Europe and Africa on my, Europe and Africa. And what about Australia? We'll put another bee on the Barbie.
Now, I can't say that in the heat of performance, we didn't get a few stings. I got one somewhere on my scalp. I think that was about the time that I was dumping a large container, I think a top hat full of bees on my head. No, it was a pot. It was a pot of bees that I was dumping on my head.
We have 1 million bees in this. Okay, it's not 1 million bees, more like 100,000 bees. It's still more animals than produced by all the magicians. Okay, now it's 1 million bees. Sigmund and Leroy, you are wimps. It is your move, and Satan's not.
You know, Penn's very animated, and I think during the course of his animation, he got stung some 20 or 24 times, which is not pleasant. My favorite of his stings, of course, was that he was talking so enthusiastically that one actually flew into his mouth, got trapped, and stung him on the roof of his mouth. The only reaction he had was that his, well, how shall I say, his, all right, I'll say it, his scrotum swelled up, and he very proudly showed it around backstage.
There's another kind of animal we want to do, too, and that is a rabbit out of a hat. There's nothing at all scary about a rabbit, is there? Well, how about this rabbit? I wonder how many children watching tonight are going to be talking about that to a court-appointed psychiatrist. There we have it. Don't try this at home.
Network on television, TLC, Adventures for Your Mind.
Playing risky, feeling frisky. There's no turning back. You're caught in the act. Then befuddled drivers, highway terror. Gasp at a night of human error. Caught in the act, the world's worst drivers. Sunday starting at 8 on DLC.
It's okay, you know, it's not a live animal. It's not the shoes that you wanted.
The Lexus December to Remember sales event.
Honey, you gotta see this.
Okay.
You'll find values you never believed possible.
You like it?
10.
Whoa. The December to Remember sales event ends January 3rd. Missing it would definitely spoil the surprise. See your Lexus dealer.
It's the most remarkable garage in the world. The garage that invented an industry, that reinvented work with a few simple rules. Work quickly, no bureaucracy, just invent. For 6 decades, this garage has been the workshop of the world's inventors. It will be still, because the company that began in this garage will return to the rules of this garage. Watch.
Introducing the new professional high-speed rotary tool from Dremel. With digital controls and electronic feedback, it's more of everything you buy a Dremel rotary tool for. For every problem, there's a Dremel solution.
It was the holidays in Cellular Town. And all was not well.
What happened here?
It's the cellular, sir. The long distance bill. You signed a contract.
Here, The Sprint PCS free and clear plan gives you crystal clear calls for as little as a dime anytime. From anywhere in their nationwide network.
300 anytime minutes for only $30, including free long distance.
Just in time for the holidays at Circuit City. Get an instant $400 toward any Circuit City purchase when you sign up for 3 years of CompuServe 2000 Premier Internet Service, only $21.95 per month. Just sign up at Circuit City and we'll hand you a $400 merchandise card instantly, good toward anything in our store. Apply your $400 merchandise card to a computer, camcorder, big screen TV, or refrigerator. It's $400 of whatever you want, only at Circuit City.
It's all in a day's work for Steel City's paramedics. Drive time on the water. Traffic is ugly, and a driver gets slammed.
The driver is not out.
Paramedics, an all-new episode, Monday at 8, only on TLC.
Stabbed into his heart.
There's no business like the trauma business. Hollywood couldn't even write the script.
Let's do CPR.
It's an action flick, all right, without the special effects. Trauma, Life in the ER, an all-new episode, Tuesday at 8, only on TLC.
We all want good health. Now there's a TV channel that can help you get it. Discovery Health Channel. Health is experts you can trust. Real stories that inspire you. Information that could change your life. Health is Discovery Health Channel. To get it, call your local cable or satellite provider. Because in today's world, good health doesn't just happen. You have to ask for it.
The King brothers, separated at birth. George King went to a family that subscribed to fishing magazines. James's family subscribed to the Wall Street Journal. 28 years later, George lives with his parents, while his brother James started a B2B web company and went public with a record first-day pop. Food for thought, especially since you can get 13 weeks of the Wall Street Journal for just 57 cents a day. That's 25% off the regular rate. Call 800-923-3300. That's 800-923-3300 for the Wall Street Journal.
The most famous magician of all time, Harry Houdini, earned his place in history as a daredevil performer of extremely dangerous tricks.
Neither Houdini nor Penn Teller ever performed dangerous tricks. When you hear of Houdini escaping from a packing crate was tossed off a bridge, well, had you actually seen the event, it wasn't tossed off the bridge. It was gingerly and carefully lowered into the water because Houdini left no concern for safety unattended to. You'd be mad to do it. Art is not about real danger. Art's about make-believe. And anyone who allows real danger in art is deeply immoral.
In the 70 years since Houdini's death, many inaccurate and misleading claims have been made about his exploits. Only a few first-person accounts, along with some fragments of newsreels and films, can bear witness to the truth behind the Houdini legend.
Virtually everything that anyone said or wrote about Houdini, and certainly anything that he said or wrote about himself, needs to be questioned. I think that the vast majority of Houdini's escapes required physical strength, agility, endurance, and athletic ability more than overcoming any real severe element of danger. Properly performed under the predictable planned circumstances he had devised, there was relatively little danger.
The gathered crowd was unable to see a safety rope attached to Houdini's ankle. So great were his skills as a showman that not one of the thousands of people below ever suspected that Houdini was in fact in no danger at all. But some of his tricks were truly dangerous. His Chinese water torture cell escape was the trick in Houdini's show that carried the greatest risk. A reinforced glass box resembling a phone booth was filled with 250 gallons of cold water. Houdini, securely fastened by his ankles and handcuffed, would then be lowered headfirst into the water. The torture cell was securely locked and covered. Eyewitness reports claim that Houdini would remain underwater as long as 5 minutes before escaping and revealing himself to the frenzied audience. Only a handful of modern performers have ever even attempted this escape.
we decided to do a version of Houdini's water torture cell. So we rehearsed that and built the props and we taped it. And it was a very bad idea, I think, to go underwater. It's not something I would do in my show, in my live show. I just can't see doing that twice a night. It really was dangerous. I remember when we were taping the trick, when I went under the water and they locked the lid on, the cameras were rolling, I remember thinking to myself, what was I thinking? Why did I ever agree to do this?
Okay. Ready, Simon? Yeah.
The secret to Harry Houdini's water torture cell is known to only a dozen people in the entire world. American escape artist Bob Fellows is one of the very few performers to present the escape exactly as Houdini did it more than 70 years ago.
Hold on. Go.
Slot, curtains up. Go, go.
Go, go, go. We're at 35 seconds. 1 minute, raise the curtain. Back down, back down. One minute, 45 seconds. 1 minute, 55 seconds. 2 minutes, drop the curtain.
The illusion of decapitation has always been featured heavily in magic history, especially in the 19th century. Many magicians realized that a baffling illusion, a splash of stage blood, and some genuine risk to life or limb would guarantee a packed theater. Magicians have long known that in a dark and smoky theater, a horrified audience usually cannot perceive that the severed head isn't real. According to the 16th century book on magic, The Discovery of Witchcraft by Reginald Scott, decapitation was originally used to portray biblical stories, like the beheading of John the Baptist. The trick is such a classic that master magician Lance Burton still performs it in his Las Vegas show. It consists of a magician removing someone's head and placing it on a table. The disembodied head is still alive and speaks to the magician and to the audience.
Okay, let's check in with the patient. Ah! He ain't got no body! Well, at least his singing voice has improved.
Modern audiences are still entertained by this old illusion, though nowadays it's usually performed as a comedy. In the past, magicians embellished their decapitation illusions with graphic storylines and grisly methods. Reenactments of human sacrifices led almost inevitably to public execution by guillotine. In the 1950s, the dramatic lighting, music, and stage presence of South American magician Ricciardi elevated the decapitation illusion to the cutting edge of the art. Ricciardi went on to achieve even greater fame for his presentation of one of the most famous illusions in magic. Sawing a woman in half has been presented in many different forms by many performers. The original version was invented by British magician Percy Tibbles, who used the stage name Selbit. Selbit's simple version consisted of sawing through a box with a woman inside it. It was so popular, it was rapidly copied and elaborated on by other magicians, including American Horace Golden. Golden, a rival of Selbit's, devised a new method of doing the trick in which the halves of the box were separated. Throughout the trick, the woman's head and feet were visible, making his version that much more convincing. But the large size of the box blatantly suggested to the audience the method employed by Golden. An American illusion designer, Guy Jarrett, criticized Golden, claiming he'd done more to damage magic than any other individual. Selbit wasn't discouraged by Golden's improved version, and he resolved to take the illusion to America. Unfortunately, Golden got there first and patented the trick. By the early 1920s, numerous rival magicians, franchised both by Golden and Selbit, were sawing ladies in half all over America. The rivalry between the two men continued and even extended on and off stage. Golden kept ambulances, doctors, and nurses in attendance at all his theaters. Selbit countered by employing a man to casually empty a bucket of stage blood into the gutter as theater crowds watched in horror. This rivalry could easily be interpreted as blatant copying. Copyright infringement and creative piracy is still a problem that plagues magicians today.
Copyism is not any form of compliment. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery? No. If someone is copying something that you've developed for your act, they're basically stealing your work. And stealing that is no more of a compliment than it is if you came to my house and stole my television.
Even worse than magicians stealing ideas from each other was the danger that the public might find out how the tricks were done. If the tricks became common knowledge, a lot of magicians would be out of business.
Making a good Cabernet takes focus and concentration. As a Sutter home winemaker, I take pride in how focused I am, on picking only the finest grapes, and waiting till just the right time. Some might think I care too much about grapes, but isn't a good Cabernet worth it?
Sutter Home, preoccupied since 1890.
We're known as Bill and Mel, or the other way around, Mill and Bill.
We love Walmart because they're friendly all over. You can't beat the service that Ann gives to us. You couldn't get anything quicker.
She's the very best there is in pharmacists.
Yes, there is no one better. And if somebody wants to give me an argument about that, send them over.
You feel you trust her.
Don't forget, the medicine that she gives to us has to keep us going. Life is a wonderful thing if you have your health.
My driving test kind of got off to a bad start.
On calls like this, you want to talk a while.
That's why it's always a good idea to dial 10-10-321.
Well, I thought I was in first.
With 10-10-321, you save 50% on calls over 10 minutes. But that's just 8 cents a minute, day or night.
I was supposed to turn on the blinker.
And no monthly fees. And that 50% off, you can go on and on and on.
So finally, I pull out of the parking space.
Talk as long as you want with 10-10-321.
Thought I'd let my friends here help demonstrate a few key points of the Subaru Forester. Go ahead, boys.
First, there's the added traction of full-time all-wheel drive. Better cornering than a Lexus RX 300.
And did I mention it got the highest rating in its class in recent crash tests?
That's gotta hurt.
Subaru Forester. Sport utility tough, car easy.
Ready or not, here it comes. This may be your last chance to watch TLC or anything else. Whether the end comes by flood or famine or plague or worse or nothing at all, one thing is certain. This is the best place to wait and see. It's Y2K with TLC. Tune in for the end. The TLC Armageddon night beginning New Year's Eve and ending, well... Now, what are you going to do with all that canned food? That's so 20th century.
Danish-born magician Dante had his own particular way of dealing with spoilsports who tried to reveal his magical secrets.
During the 30s in America, Camel Cigarettes put out an expose in the newspapers on how tricks were done. Dante was working in New York doing Sawing a Woman in Half at the time. And every night, he would go on and prove to them that what they saw in the paper was totally incorrect, and the people would go out of the theater saying, I have no idea how that was done, and it was exactly what was exposed in the paper, but he was able to condition them and prove to them it wasn't so.
Dante performed the sawing illusion throughout his long career, usually with the help of Australian beauty queen Moyo Miller as his assistant.
Do you know, the other day I was wondering how many times I had been sawed in half. So I got my little calculator out, and we calculated on a basis of 23 years, 1 show a night, 2 shows a night for 3 years in England, 2 matinees at least a week. And Lord knows how many times we did the 4 shows and 5 shows a day during the war years. I came up with 11,800 times. I think that must be pretty near a record.
After the Selbit Golden feud, Dante resolved to never allow his act to be copied or plagiarized.
It was a very common procedure for people to come into the theater with their little book and pad and so forth, and make sketches of different illusions. This was one reason why Dante would never give his okay to have the show photographed, and that's why there is very little on film now of the Dante show.
The sawing illusion has come a long way since the big wooden box days of Golden and Selbit.
The thin model sawing is perhaps the best known example in which the box the girl is contained in appears to be very thin, offering no room for another girl to be involved in the performance or any other method the audience might imagine.
In fact, it's one of the most baffling versions of the trick ever invented.
I believe that magicians have a way of losing track totally of what the idea is behind an illusion that's been around for a long time. And that seems to me what's happened with a sawing in half. Sawing in half is an incredibly brutal idea. And in modern times, about the only other party that I know who's done it with appropriate brutality is the South American magician Ricciardi. He would take one of his female assistants, who I believe was one of his daughters, which makes this even more perverse, and she was dressed in a kind of a hospital gown. And he would lay her on a very thin-topped table, after apparently putting her under with some sort of anesthetic. He then brought out a huge circular saw, and before the eyes of the audience ran the circular saw forward, sawing a groove in her right about the hips. Not all the way through, mind you, not a cutesy, oh, let's sever her completely and show the halves, but just a totally, hideously plausible gash about that deep in right about the hips. Now, incidentally, while he's sawing, there's a wonderful mist of blood that flies out over the audience. Quite appalling. He then invited the audience up onto the stage and take a close look. And lo and behold, the next 15 minutes of the show, the audience would come up, and almost every single person would want to file past and see what was there. Now, of course it was an illusion. You know, Ricciardi used to spend much time in abattoirs getting the appropriate interior for this gash. But the audience would come by and gaze in. Simultaneously, two of Ricciardi's assistants would pick up the corpse of the woman, raise her vertically. The front of the gown would fall down in front of her abdomen, and there was an enormous, almost menstrual stain in front. It was a god-awful, dreadful sight. And the curtain would come down, and that was the end of the show. Now, there's something to send you home thinking. The public doesn't usually have the loftiest opinion of magicians, and that's because they've often seen very bad ones perform. They've seen the birthday party magician who screws up his tricks. They've seen the obnoxious stage magician who invites a woman up onto the stage and then makes snide and flirtatious remarks. They've seen magicians very badly dressed, performing to very bad music and doing highly insulting things. I mean, when you take a woman and stick her in a box, well, first of all, that's rude. And then when you proceed to sever that box into several pieces with a large, vicious saw, well, I'm surprised that there aren't feminists picketing every one of those shows.
I think deep down within each and every one of us, there's kind of a shadowed sort of desire to push our own boundaries, our own personal boundaries. Some people have different kind of dark secret desires. Some people desire to be controlled. Others have these kind of boundaries that they really want to push. And so when they watch these kind of torturous illusions and reenactments, it's a way that they can vicariously live through that. They can have those experiences. It's the same reason why we go on roller coasters and bungee jump and put ourselves through these, you know, ridiculous experiences that, like, scare the hell out of us. Because it's a safe way to go into those places, into those corners of ourselves.
One extremely dangerous stage illusion evolved from the infamous game of Russian roulette. A live bullet is loaded into a revolver, the chamber randomly spun, and fired at the head of the magician. In theory, a combination of mechanical and sleight-of-hand methods prevents any chance of an accident occurring. In theory, that is. British magician Maurice Fogel believed he had eliminated every element of chance in a trick where 6 rifles were fired at him at point-blank range. Apparently, using telepathy, he removed the rifle that contained the live round. But more than once, the trick went disastrously wrong. For the rest of his life, Fogel carried the scars of near-fatal calamities. His worst accident occurred when he was shot between the eyes. Thanks to a talented surgeon, he survived, keeping the pellet as a macabre souvenir. But perhaps the deadliest gun trick of them all is the infamous bullet catch, where a magician catches an actual bullet between his teeth. A marked bullet is loaded into a gun by a member of the public. Now, the danger of this trick lies in the fact that for a large part of the performance, the gun and bullet are out of the hands of the magician. Right up to the moment the trigger is pulled, even the magician doesn't know if the trick will work. First performed in France in the 16th century, the bullet catch has thrilled audiences all over the world. There have been many variations on the theme, including firing squads and multiple bullets. Some magicians chose to catch the bullets on a plate, others on the tip of a sword. Developments in gun design have changed the look of the trick, with black powder muskets giving way to bolt-action, high-powered rifles. But the one constant of this trick is the extraordinary amount of nerve required by the magician.
Even though you know that you've done everything right, when that stranger you've just met is standing across the room, pointing the rifle at you and about to fire the bullet that he has loaded into the gun, it's an unnerving experience, and one that I would not particularly want to do very often.
And with good reason. The bullet catch is the one trick in all of magic that is said to carry a curse. Over the years, at least 12 magicians have died, and countless others have been badly injured.
My 2 favorite stories of bad things that happened in the bullet catch are the magician who used to do the trick. At one point when the trick was done with muzzle-loading guns, one magician used to do it by the method where you put the ball that's going to fly through the air into the gun, and then you ram it into the ramrod, and the ramrod was so contrived as to sneak the ball right out of the gun. And this fellow thought, well, the ramrod's a little bit obvious as a prop. Maybe I'll use my magic wand. And so he had a magic wand that was black ebony with ivory tips. And he had a little ball of wax on the end of one of his ivory tips. So he rammed it into the gun, pulled it out, and sneaked the ball out in his hand, stuck to the wax. He then rammed the other end in, just as a little extra precaution, and didn't happen to notice that the other end of his wand broke off and was there in the gun, and the ivory tip of his wand was fired straight into his face. That's one of my favorite stories about the bullet catch. My other favorite story is the fellow who was doing it at a Wild West show, and someone just stood up in the audience, and after the magician had successfully caught the bullet on stage, said, "Hey, catch this!" and bang, shot him.
One of the 19th century's greatest advocates of the bullet catch was Signor Antonio Blitz, an Englishman who toured America in the heyday of the Wild West show. Blitz might be considered one of the luckiest performers of the bullet catch in a time when just about everyone seemed to carry a gun. In New York City, a volunteer spiked Blitz's gun with a handful of carpet tacks. The unsuspecting magician stood his ground as the marksman took aim and fired. Luckily for Blitz, his aim was off. The intended victim left the badly damaged stage with only a lacerated hand.
It was the holidays in Cellular Town, and all was not well.
What happened here?
It's the cellular, sir. The long distance bill. Sign a contract.
Here. Sprint PCS free and clear plan gives you crystal clear calls for as little as a dime anytime. From anywhere in their nationwide network.
300 anytime minutes for only $30, including free long distance.
This is my invention. The silverware instrument. C'est les lunettes éclairantes. You could slide them, but they don't slide by themselves. It worked. It worked. Headlight. It could change somebody's life. 24-hour sentence. That is the greatest idea I've ever came up in my whole life.
Gravity, the force that holds the Earth in orbit around the sun, also holds the car to the road around a hairpin turn. But in extreme conditions, even gravity can use help. The reassuring performance of the RL with Vehicle Stability Assist from Acura.
Now on TLC, this fellow attempted something risky. These fun-loving students were feeling frisky. The tape tells the story, caught in the act. With improved surveillance, there's no turning back. And cameras roll on dangerous curves, capturing smashes, crashes, and swerves. Watch befuddled drivers, highway terror. Shake your head at 2 hours of human error. Caught in the act, the world's worst drivers. Sunday, starting at 8 on TLC.
Of a white.
It's a holiday tradition.
Oh, there's no place like home.
Time Life brings you the treasury of Christmas.
Have a holly jolly Christmas. Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer. Chestnuts roasting.
The Time Life treasury of Christmas on 2 CDs or 2 cassettes.
Rocking around the Christmas tree at the Christmas.
You'll get 50 holiday favorites.
Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bell rock. Sigh.
Each song brings you the wonder of Christmas.
Have yourself a...
So call now and enjoy the treasury of Christmas.
To order Treasury of Christmas, call 1-800-408-8866 or send $19.99 for 2 cassettes or $26.99 for 2 CDs, plus shipping and handling to the address on your screen.
The most famous bullet catch of all was performed by magician Chung-Ling Soo. Due to his tragic death at the height of his fame, Soo's name has become forever synonymous with this hazardous trick. The tragedy happened in 1918, when Chung-Ling Soo was performing on stage at the Wood Green Empire in North London. It was his second show on a Saturday night in March, and the theater was packed with people eager to see this world-famous star. In the trick called Condemned to Death by the Boxers, Soo was the target of a Chinese firing squad. 2 bullets were marked and checked, loaded into guns, and handed to the marksman. On the fateful night Chung-Ling Soo was shot, one of the gunmen was 17-year-old Jack Grossman.
Quite a lot of people went out of the theater really didn't know what had happened. They didn't realize he'd been shot and killed. They thought it was the end of the performance, and quite a queer way of ending it.
The audience thought it was all part of the act. But as he went down, Soo apparently called, "Oh my God, something's wrong." Stage manager then rang down the curtain. They then saw there was blood pouring from his chest. The bullet went right through him. He was wrapped in a curtain they found off stage, and then as quickly as possible taken to the local hospital.
During the official inquiry, the firearms expert Robert Churchill had quickly discovered the reason why Sue had been so secretive about the guns. They had in fact been altered. The entry to the barrel, where the percussion cap would normally fire the charge, had been sealed off, and a channel had been bored into the ramrod tube below.
When you pulled the trigger, instead of firing the charge in the barrel, you fired a charge in the ramrod tube. And unbeknown to anyone, Sue had put a blank charge in the ramrod tube. So that, in essence, what happened was the bullet was never fired and Sue produced a duplicate.
At the end of every performance, Sue would secretly remove the marked bullet which was still in the barrel. Churchill discovered that he used the unorthodox method of unscrewing the breech of the gun instead of extracting the lead bullet with a corkscrew attached to the ramrod. Now, this avoided damage to the marked bullet, but these repeated unscrewings of the breech led to significant wear of the screw threads. After 12 years of continual performance, the whole assembly was extremely loose. Now, another problem was that Sue favored a very fine-grained gunpowder. Had he used a coarser grain, the tragedy might never have happened. The fine grain trickled through the worn screw thread into the barrel itself. So, on that ill-fated night, one gun actually fired its bullet. But the question that still haunts many today is which one of the two assistants actually fired the bullet that killed Chung-Ling Soo? Dan Crowley, the second gunman, remembered at the time that his rifle seemed to have a greater kick than usual. That, of course, would happen if a bullet was actually fired from his gun. Jack Grossman, on the other hand, noticed nothing unusual. In the course of the inquiry, all of Sue's bullet-catching secrets were revealed in the newspapers, but the public soon learned his biggest secret of all. Everyone assumed Chung-Ling Soo was Chinese. Off stage, when he met reporters, he would talk some sort of gibberish to them, and his Japanese assistant would obligingly translate into broken English. To an unsophisticated public, Sue seemed to be the epitome of a Chinese magician.
On the Monday morning, when the news broke in the papers that Chung-Ling Soo had been shot and fatally wounded, and it went on to say that Sue was in fact an American, William Ellsworth Robinson, born in New York City, this was quite a shock of a second nature. Here, their hero had been shot. Secondly, he wasn't the man they thought he was.
Robinson had learned his trade working with many of the great magicians of the 19th century. He invented a few minor illusions, but achieved little personal success as a performer. Seeing the popularity of other Eastern magicians, some real, some bogus, Robinson decided to exploit the public appetite for things Asian. He assumed the identity of a mysterious Chinese conjurer, Chung-Ling Soo, and his career took off.
One of the sad features of Sue's death was that there began to appear in newspapers and books speculation as to whether he'd been murdered or whether he'd committed suicide.
Certainly I wouldn't think there was any possibility of a murder, but suicide is a very clear possibility. He might have decided to end his life in a very dramatic way, and in his contract he had to wear a bulletproof waistcoat. But that night at Wood Green Empire he didn't wear it.
For suicide, the evidence of Robert Churchill points to a chance occasion, a chance effect, due to the cumulative effect of manipulations on the rifle, simply to remove the bullets after each show. If Sue had wished to commit suicide, in my opinion, he would have gone about it in a foolproof way, not in one which depended upon the elements of chance.
When the news of Sue's death reached his rival Houdini, the escape artist announced that he would perform the bullet catch. But Houdini's mentor, magician Harry Keller, urged him not to try it, claiming it was too dangerous and left too much to chance.
Don't try the damn bullet trick. We can't afford to lose Houdini. You owe it to your friends and to your family to cut out all the stuff that entails risk of your life.
Houdini took his advice and never performed the bullet catch.
Oh, Mom, it's great. My first apartment. You should see it. It's huge.
When you've got things to talk about, it's a good idea to dial 10-10-321 first.
And I got a great view of the river.
With 10-10-321, you get 50% off calls over 10 minutes. That's just 8 cents a minute, day or night, and no monthly fees. And then 50% off. You can share every last detail.
And I even have a garden.
Talk as long as you want with 10-10-321.
The freedom, adventure, it puts me at one with natural elements, liberating, allows me to clear my head. One of the few things I can do whereby I actually don't hear music in my head. Brings me closer to God, allows me to bask in the wonder of God. Being at the top of a mountain is one of the most incredibly beautiful experiences I've ever had.
Introducing the new professional high-speed rotary tool from Dremel. With digital controls and electronic feedback, it's more of everything you buy a Dremel rotary tool for. For every problem, there's a Dremel solution.
To get around these parts, they say you need dogs. Good thing I got my new Subaru Outback. It's got loads of cargo space, toasty seat warmers, and something you won't find on your average sport utility. The added traction of full-time all-wheel drive. It's the perfect way to get around, even when you're way out here. Now, as for the dogs, they're not much help if you ask me. Outback, the world's first sport utility wagon.
It's all in a day's work for Steel City's paramedics. Drive time on the water. Traffic is ugly, and a driver gets slammed.
The driver is not out.
Paramedics, an all-new episode, Monday at 8, only on TLC.
Stabbed into his heart.
There's no business like the trauma business. Hollywood couldn't even write the script.
Let's do CPR.
It's an action flick, all right, without the special effects. Trauma, Life in the ER, an all-new episode, Tuesday at 8, only on TLC.
Ready or not, here it comes. This may be your last chance to watch TLC or anything else. Whether the end comes by flood or famine or plague or worse or nothing at all, one thing is certain. This is the best place to wait and see. It's Y2K with TLC. Tune in for the end. The TLC Armageddon night beginning New Year's Eve and ending, well... Now, what are you going to do with all that canned food? That's so 20th century.
By the 1930s, magician Ted Anneman took the bullet catch to a new level of realism. He performed it outdoors, in daylight, with highly skilled police marksmen.
He was a very moody and troubled person who had an unfortunate and sad life, but he was a very creative innovator in magic, particularly mentalism. The significance of Ted Anneman's version of the bullet-catching trick is that it was one of the most closely guarded secrets in magic in the 20th century.
This extremely rare piece of film of Anneman's performance can only hint at the level of drama that he brought to this trick. Although Anneman performed the bullet catch only 4 times in his career, his is still considered one of the most dramatic presentations of the trick ever witnessed. Even today, over 50 years after his death, the exact method he used remains a mystery. Over time, magicians have made changes and improvements to the technical side of the bullet catch trick. Often a glass or plastic screen between the gun and the magician proves that a projectile has in fact been fired.
I have a sheet of glass. I'll put the glass between you and that bulletproof backstop. Now I will be holding this handkerchief. When I drop the handkerchief, that will be your signal to fire.
To fire.
Aim very carefully through this sheet of glass, and your target will be my mouth.
Your mouth.
I will attempt to catch the bullet in my mouth using my tongue to cushion the impact. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, would you remove the safety catch, please?
I have removed the safety catch.
All right, I'm going to stand right about here. Please do not fire until I drop the handkerchief. It's a hair trigger, so don't try to take up any slack in the trigger. All right? Here we go.
Wait a minute. He's all right. Good God. That is a horrible sensation. Are you all right? And there is the bullet. Let me check the bullet to see. My initial G on the end of the bullet.
Good.
That is a horrible
You
experience.
may keep that for a souvenir.
Horrible experience.
Would you open the gun, please?
I will open the gun.
Push hard to the
I'm so
all
nervous
right.
I can hardly get it open.
Meticulous attention to safety has allowed professional bullet catcher Dorothy Dietrich to perform the trick on an almost daily basis without mishap.
This last part of the show is not a sketch. It's based on an old sideshow trick with a very bad reputation. It uses bullets. 12 people have died attempting this trick, and they were only using one bullet. Penn and Teller are using two. One for Penn and one for Teller.
Thank you, Carrie. We're going to move a bullet from this side of the stage to that side of the stage, and another bullet from that side of the stage to this side of the stage without crossing that line.
We don't really do many things for the sake of shocking. Though we do use a lot of sharp instruments, and we do use blood, and we do use weapons. We use these all because they create dramatic situations. When you see a magic act very often, there's nothing even remotely dramatic about it. I mean, what's dramatic about somebody pulling out one pigeon after another, or pulling out little silk handkerchiefs and tying knots in there? There's nothing like, you wouldn't find that in a movie. In a movie, you would find the villain pursuing the hero through dangerous straits with a large gun. There has to be danger for there to be drama.
And we're going to do it using these magic wands. These are 357 Magnum Colt Python magic wands.
Concealing our safety was what allows the audience to feel the drama of the whole business. And we have actually operating during that particular piece 3 independent safety systems, any 2 of which could conceivably fail and we would still be absolutely safe. So although I hope your heart still pounds when you watch it, know that we will not die.
Some would say that it took magicians Penn and Teller to take this 400-year-old trick into the next century.
Ladies and gentlemen, Penn and Teller's magic bullet.
We perform lots of things that look very dangerous. We do not perform dangerous tricks. Dangerous tricks are performed by fools.
Cameras, walk away.
The modern audience's hunger for danger seems endless. Thanks to safety devices and advances in technology, it's an appetite that some talented magicians can satisfy and still survive.
Watch your ears, please.
You like this TLC show? Now you can own it. Call 1-800-636-8324 and start an adventure for your mind. TLC offers its best shows on home video, including the episode you just saw. All the action, the insight, the practical advice you count on from TLC. Get your own high-quality VHS tape of this show for only $19.95. TLC, Adventures for Your Mind on home video. Call 1-800-636-8324.